Why does Jumba and Pleakley move in with Nani, Lilo, and Stitch when they are left on Earth? In the previous days leading up to that, they had been ruthlessly going after Stitch and putting all of the members of this family at risk, and they both could have just left on the ship they had come on. They didn't have to stay or be embraced into this Ohana, but eventually, for some reason, they were. Hello, I'm Isaac from Monso Videos, where we discuss fun topics for fun people. On my channel, I focus on spreading magic by examining Disney films, so if you are new here, consider subscribing. Jumba and Pleakley are the duo of aliens who are sent after Experiment 626 when he escapes the clutches of the Galactic Federation. Together, the creator of 626 and this expert on the planet Earth work together in an attempt to recapture the little blue creature. But in the end, they fail, and Pleakley and Jumba remain on the planet. There, we learn in the sequel films and series that they move into Lilo's old room and develop into a sort of uncle and aunt for Lilo and Stitch. But where did this trust, connection, and bond come from? Jumba and Pleakley's attempts to capture Stitch are the reason that Nani was fired from her job, were the ones who destroyed her house and almost caused Lilo to drown. So how could they be trusted? How could Lilo's older sister Nani especially let these galactic criminals into their home? Well, the family bond that was eventually built, I think, goes back to this entire Ohana being troubled and broken, but good-natured outcasts. The truth was that Jumba and Pleakley were both kind of in low points in their lives as well, and were just struggling to get out of it like Nani and Lilo had been. Jumba had been arrested and labeled an idiot by the public, while Pleakley had his reputation eradicated through the inability to safely assist in the capture of Stitch. They were both attempting to prove themselves again to restore their lives to what they once were, a life of experimentation and a life of prestige. But of course, through their inability to have 626 under their custody, they were considered worthless and their performance despicable. Once the Grand Councilwoman captures Stitch herself, she further assures them that this mission could ruin them for the rest of their lives. The duo's incompetence and lack of success in retrieving Stitch had left them worse than when they had arrived and began their journey on Earth. My hair is crazy. Over the course of their adventure, Jumba and Pleakley were simply labeled as two screw-ups after all of their opportunities to show what they could do had failed. Their status and the faith individuals had in them reduced until they were even intentionally left behind by their own kind so that their government wouldn't even have to deal with them any further. In short, they were just as lost as Nani and Lilo. Even though Jumba and Pleakley had committed a lot of hazardous and destructive acts that threatened Stitch and Lilo, in a way they were doing so out of desperation to attempt to be accepted, and that was a place that Lilo and her family completely understood. They had made mistakes, but they didn't make them in hopes of hurting people. Well, I mean, Jumba made Stitch to destroy civilizations, so I guess he kind of did, but overall, when they were on Earth, that wasn't the goal. They were there to recapture their lives, only they were unable to complete that mission due to them being led astray by the kindness and empathy within them when they were asked to protect the individuals they had hurt. Through the very persuasive words of Stitch, they realize they have to help Stitch's new Ohana since deep down they had learned to care about him and the people he had surrounded himself with. Even though Jumba did not originally consider Stitch to have a family or that he could be a part of his, Jumba, as his experiment's creator, was in a way connected to Stitch. Through his own mind came all of the combinations of aliens that developed into his 626 experiments, which eventually became 628, or 29 depending on how you count Leroy. Every aspect of Stitch derived from him, and over time, Jumba learned that he cared for the being he had crafted. After growing close with Stitch through his time on Earth, we get to see how Jumba begins to take responsibility for his experiment's well-being. When Stitch began to glitch out and seemed to be deteriorating before his eyes, he works hard and passionately to ensure that Stitch will be saved, for he had become fond of the little alien. Jumba was a father to all of his experiments, which of course included Stitch. Pleakley was a being who was obsessed with and cared for every aspect of Earth, from all of its people to its many customs, so he was fascinated to stay and learn. He didn't have any inherent connection to Stitch like Jumba had, but he was an alien who had witnessed the universe much more similarly to Stitch than either Nani or Lilo, and had learned to care about Stitch and watch over Lilo. Even though he was one who attempted to follow the rules and take part in what he thought was the cautious next move, The truth was that he had grown a fondness for the individuals he had encountered on his journey to Earth, and that goes beyond Stitch himself. That might sound kind of weird since he was kind of assisting in the hunting of an experimental creature, but I can assure you it's endearing to the core. Pleakley and Jumba had kindness, care, and love within them, and had found a compassion for the unique being that was Stitch. But they also came to empathize with the struggles of Nani and Lilo as well. Even though they had caused a lot of destruction and heartache in hopes of reclaiming their old lives, Jumba and Pleakley did have good within them, just like Stitch, and this is really revealed through their first heroic act of saving Lilo. After both of these outliers within their own society watched as a being designed for destruction was accepted and loved by a family, and they came to understand that those people were having their lives broken because of them, they took action. The duo had went to great lengths to bring about their former glories and to rise out of the trench they had both fallen into, but when Lilo seems to be lost after being stolen by Captain Gantu, they are unwilling to let her disappear when Stitch asks them to help rescue her. They didn't have to go after Lilo when she was taken by Gantu, but through Stitch's guidance, they selflessly gave up their chances of having their honor, dignity, or position restored in the hopes of saving the little Hawaiian girl. Their empathy and bond with the people they had observed brought them to do what was right. Pleakley and Jumba had everything to lose, since they were promised redemption for returning to the Grand Councilwoman with Stitch in their possession, but refused to sit idly by as Lilo was going to be lost in the universe, and in the end, that decision to help Nani and Stitch saved Lilo's life. Even though they had made some horrible decisions that almost tore apart Nani's life, when she needed them to recover what was most important to her, they were there to help. While they were deeply flawed beings, Nani was able to see that they had good hearts. If they have hearts, of course. They saved Lilo even though that decision could have permanently ruined the lives they had hoped to recover, and at that time it seemed like their lives beyond Earth were over. When Lilo was recovered and the Grand Councilwoman left them behind, I think they were two aliens with nowhere to go other than a Fluctron farm if they left the planet. Even though they could have gone anywhere in the big red ship, nothing was pulling them away from where they were. Years later, when all of Jumba's experiments were recovered, Jumba would be able to return to his lab, and Pleakley would be able to go and become an academic for a period of time. But after their rescue of Lilo, they had nothing which confirmed the outcast status they had attempted to escape from. Jumba and Pleakley were two aliens who had learned they felt a connection to both Stitch and the people they encountered on Earth. They were outsiders in the galaxy who had proven that their kindness, empathy, and compassion was able to come above everything else they desired, and I think all of that became clear to Nani and Lilo. These aliens were the closest entities Stitch had to a family of his own, and since they were able to prove that they were willing to do what was necessary to keep the Ohana Stitch was a part of together, Nani was willing to bring in these outcasts. They weren't perfect by any means, but neither were Nani or Lilo, and those sisters could see that they were good-natured and just looking for a place to be accepted. Therefore, when all of Lilo and Stitch's family were together to rebuild their home, they added an extra room so that Jumba and Pleakley could move in as well. Even though Jumba and Pleakley were no longer accepted by their own worlds, with Nani, Lilo, and Stitch, Jumba and Pleakley could be a part of an Ohana and have a place where they belonged.